On September 10th, the world was shaken by the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. As the founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie became one of the most influential voices of his generation, reaching millions of young people on campuses, in the media, at rallies, and through best-selling books. His message was clear: stand for truth, defend freedom, and never be afraid to live out your faith. Through his influence, Charlie mobilized a movement of young leaders determined to shape their future. To many, he was more than a commentator. He was a mentor, a catalyst, and a source of courage in challenging times. On today's show, we examine his assassination, the culture that fuels political violence, and what we can do together to stop it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have none other than the incredible, the Honorable Stockwell Day with me to discuss the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk. The premiere of this interview will be taking place pretty much right around the same time as his memorial service is. Stockwell Day, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, this one hits hard for so many reasons. And I think a lot of us have been observing and feeling that this truly is a turning point, a defining moment for those in the intersection of culture, government, policy, and even media. You live in this space, you have lived in this space for decades now, for most of your professional career. What are your dominant observations right now, Mr. Day, regarding what we just witnessed with the assassination of Charlie Kirk?
Well, all the adjectives have been used. I can't come up with any more. Devastating, heartbreaking, shocking. It's going to be world changing in some ways. I already believe that. For people of my generation, we used to say, "Do you remember where you were?" We can remember where we were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And for this generation, it's going to be something of that magnitude. I was on a business conference call when the people on the other end of the call, the business person I was dealing with, his wife literally ran into the room on the conference call and said, "Charlie Kirk has been assassinated." And we just, we're in shock. We collapsed. There were tears. There were prayers, of course. So the personal impact is huge, because those of us who are in the public sphere, and I'm nowhere near the level he was, but it just everything hits you at once. And then I have a number of grandkids, and so some of my grandsons are big fans of Charlie Kirk, really admire him and what he's willing to do on campus. Some of them are on campuses themselves, and the shock, overwhelmed, the questions that start coming out, why, and oh my goodness, and what does this mean? Did a sort of an immediate historic reflection back 2,000 years, and the early young people who were coming to faith after the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and they were literally going out into all the world with this fabulous message. And then, can you imagine what it would have been like when they heard Peter has just been murdered? Peter, the great apostle, has just been murdered and crucified. And then, reeling from that, they would get the word James, uh, Jesus' brother on earth, has just been murdered. And one after another over a period of years. And so there would be the shock, there would be the heartbreak, there would be the tears. But as we know from history, they heard the clarion call that they had had from Christ himself, in that these things are going to happen. We are going to see these, along with great blessings and joy. And so weep, and then call on God, and then continue on and change the world. Like that is the message. I don't want to oversimplify, but that is the message. And I think the world that knew and loved Charlie Kirk is still very much in the weeping stage, for sure. But I can tell you, I feel an emerging is coming that is going to be at a greater level because of him, even if he had continued on in the amazing way he was going.
Mhm. I heard it said recently that you can kill a person. You can take out a figure, a cultural commentator, an evangelist, pick your adjective of what he was, but you can't kill an idea.
Mm.
You can't kill the gospel, obviously, and you just unpack that so beautifully. And this is why I think a lot of people are calling him a martyr. He was one of these figures, as you already mentioned, that stood in that space of not just cultural commentary, but also the proclamation of the gospel. It's such a wild, wild moment, and truly a defining one. I want to talk about the role in media of media, excuse me, and the vilification of high profile individuals on the basis of their beliefs. And we've seen this language that has developed over the last years, verbal violence, where this idea is being put in the minds of our young people, seemingly that to disagree with someone, to disagree with them politically or ideologically, is actually an act of violence. Um, and so, how does a generation respond to that when they're being fed that for somebody to disagree with me is a violent act? Is not the natural response to that type of thinking, uh, that to violently oppose that person might somehow be justified? Is the media actually complicit in cultivating this type of toxicity in the next generation?
Yeah, I would say mainstream media are actually the main propagator of that. Recent polling that was out by a very significant social polling group, and they polled some 300,000 people. This was in the U.S., so there's similar reflections in Canada, and among Gen Z, much higher acceptance that it's justified actually to be violent against someone who, in their view, is already promoting violence. So here's where media, you're right, they're not just complicit. In fact, they are in the forefront of that message, and they've convinced a huge number of people that if you say words that upset somebody, that in itself is violent and must be stopped. But if you look back to the formation of Marxism in the late 1800s and then moving into the 1900s, and then even before that, you could see that in the philosophers who were key in the advancement of the French Revolution. There's this thought that anybody who opposes the socialist left in their minds are the only things that are going to save the world. So anybody who opposes these views is actually hurting the world, is actually hurting society. And somebody who is hurting society and hurting people has to be taken out. So this is a culturally Marxist reflex. Of course, it was refined not just by Lenin, and I'm not talking about John Lennon here, um, but following Lenin, then Stalin and others. Every time there's been the advancement of a significant socialist government, and then evolving into communism once you take the democratic part away, that's always central to it. And that's where this notion that if you are speaking words that are opposed to what we believe, that in itself is violence. That's what we're being told. Now, that's not true. The violence is when somebody stands up and hits someone or shoots someone. So media is front and center in that. And unfortunately, hand in hand with them, this is now at the so-called higher education in our universities for decades. This has been the culturally Marxist message is when you can't win the debate, you have to take out the person who is winning the debate.
Wow. This is all very rattling. That would be an understatement. Very, very eye opening. I want to talk in a moment about the reactions. Many of us, that's actually become a story in itself, how people are reacting to this in different dimensions. But before we shift gears, I do want to show this clip because my observation is that this is not just an American conversation, not just an American problem, but this dynamic is very well alive right here in Canada, as you know full well. I want to show this clip. It's actually by a podcaster. His name is Elevate. You can find him on Twitter, all the streams. But he posted this clip recently and weighed into this conversation about how the media steers the mindset. So let's just watch that right now, and then we'll get you to respond.
Look at how they report the Charlie Kirk story after it happened, and then give it 24 hours and how they report on it today.
Following breaking news from the United States, prominent conservative commentator Charlie Kirk has been shot at an event in Utah.
So catch that. After it happened, prominent conservative commentator Charlie Kirk has been shot. Okay? All right. Hear that? Prominent conservative commentator. 24 hours later, let's have a look, see how they describe him, shall we?
Still ahead, the latest on the killing of far-right activist Charlie Kirk in the U.S. Investigators have released images of a person of interest.
It's just so egregious and in your face at this point. Far-right activist, very different from prominent conservative commentator. And if I'm being honest, out of all the conservative commentators in the States, he was probably the most milquetoast out of all of them. Out of all of them. In terms of conservative stances, he had the most mainstream stances of them all. So to turn around and say, far-right activist, that is the media trying to frame this in a specific way so as you stop feeling empathy for what happened on Wednesday.
How do you respond to that one, Stockwell?
Well, it's a great clip that you've used. It really does frame how mainstream media acts and how they articulate, because they have to demonize. They can't paint him as being, they'll briefly reflect possibly on the fact that he was a father, that he was a husband. Not too long before, earlier in the day, matter of fact, I was watching some news clips, and there was a scene where he was, much like that college scene we just saw, he was engaged with a large college crowd, university crowd. Someone came to the mic and identified himself as, left wing and a number of things. And a number of the young people in the audience started to boo him. And Charlie Kirk spoke to the conservative crowd, which was largely the audience, and said, please, let's respect this guy. He's got the courage to come to the microphone. He's got the courage to state a point of view, which he knows is going to go against most of the people in this crowd. And he has the right to be listened to. We're not going to shout him down. We're not going to be like the others. So that is those type of clips of Charlie Kirk will not be the ones you will see on the state-run media. That is clearly the tack they're going to take. And that clip you just shows is probably as good as any for people to dramatically see the shift there and to see how mainstream media wants him to be perceived.
And I would say, this is a moment to make your voice heard. Most people, they'll see that clip, they might see it on Twitter, they'll comment, they'll like, they might reshare, they might private message it to a friend. But is this not a moment to actually take a minute, actually go to the CBC website, find that viewer feedback form, and actually express your disappointment in the use of our tax dollars, and then take the next step and maybe look up your member of parliament's email address and do the same there, because we are literally paying for this.
Yeah, those are important steps. A lot of people dismiss it and they say, oh, it doesn't do any good. Call your MP or, send an email or something. Well, it does do some good, not just on this issue, but other issues that are important. The various party caucuses will meet the elected members once a week. And whatever issue is out there, the person who is chairing the caucus meeting, they're always in private, of course, will raise a particular issue, and they say, anybody hearing about this one? And they'll mention whatever the issue is. If they haven't been getting calls and serious reaction, then there'll be silence around the table, and the assumption will be is, it's not that big a deal. We can win on this issue. So it is important on issues like this and others for people to let their view be known. I know it seems like nothing ever happens, but it is important to do. The other thing that's important to do is for groups of people to get together and ask their member of parliament or their member of the legislature provincially or city councilor or mayor if they would come and actually speak to them on this and other issues. It's good for elected people to know there are groups of people out there who have concerns on these. So all of these, it requires being active. That's what defines you as being an activist. Those are important things to do, whether you think you're making headway on the issue or not. Silence is permission.
Now, let's talk about the reactions. I think many of us were toggling back and forth from, I know I was, from conservative media in the US to liberal media in the US to Canadian media to social media. And when we began to see the celebration videos starting to circulate, many of them were Canadians, whether it was the professor at University of Toronto or the social worker, legal aid worker in British Columbia celebrating the death of a man because they disagreed with him politically and perhaps just hated how effective he was on the campuses. And now the response to that, where many of these individuals are losing their jobs, it's like the shoes on the other foot for such a long time. You are a prime example, seeing prominent conservative voices that speak against the grain being canceled. Now we're seeing those that have crossed this line losing their jobs, being canceled. Your thoughts on what's unfolding right now?
Well, this is an important shift. For instance, when John F. Kennedy was killed, and he was on the left side of the spectrum, other than he had some pretty solid uh, center right fiscal policies, nobody rejoiced. There was no cheering. There was no, you couldn't, even if you could find websites, which you couldn't that day, there was nobody on the other side politically who was publicly rejoicing about that. And then a few years later, RFK Jr. or Martin Luther King Jr. Um, there was, this is, I'll say, relatively new, where people are bold faced enough to be seen, as we saw with so many, especially Gen Z, so many of them cheering, cackling, howling with delight. That's somewhat new, and it's ominous. It has to be turned around. But when you have so-called thought leaders, we can debate that, like the professor at U of T, like the cabinet minister in Manitoba, the socialist cabinet minister, um, openly appearing to exult, to be happy about that. This is a new phenomenon that has to be pushed back.
Yeah, and of course, the chilling response. Somebody on social media, talking about Danielle Smith, insinuating that she should be next. Like, this is just wild. And to think that we're actually here. Many of our viewers will know I ran for office provincially in New Brunswick. And, Rob and I had our share of experiences. He stayed up through the night for 4 months watching over our house because the threats to us were so real. We went to the police and filed reports because there was suspicious activity around our home. But basically, Mr. Day, the police just said, well, we can't do anything until somebody actually harms you. So just let us know, when somebody harms you. And, several examples are actually going through my mind right now, just from our local campaign where we had to make adjustments because of security concerns, directed towards myself. And so this is, very, very real. It's a huge conversation. It's one of the reasons it's hitting some of us so hard because it's also a little bit personal, and for a family like yourself and for what Rob and I just went through. You see the threat to Danielle Smith, Premier Danielle Smith. I guess my next question would be for our viewers, Mr. Day, where do we go from here and how do we be a part of the solution? We already talked about emailing CBC, emailing our members of parliament, but what about just in our daily life? Can we turn this thing around?
People on the left get threatened too. There are wackos out there on the extreme right, and they should just as with the same intensity, they should be tracked down, charged, and jailed. And for the media, sorry, for the police to tell you that, well, until you get harmed, we can't do anything. That's simply not true, because we see across Canada, we see in other countries, we see it's happening in the UK and other places. People are being arrested just for stating small c conservative positions. They're actually being arrested because somebody will phone in a complaint and say, I feel threatened, and by their remarks, and they are getting arrested. So you can, in fact, arrest people for certain levels of threat. And that should apply when in federal politics. I know what it's like, and my office staff knows what it's like to receive the envelope in the mail, and the office staff member opens it, and the white powder is inside. Your office is immediately shut down. Nobody's allowed to leave. People come in with hazmat suits on. Nobody's allowed to leave while the substance is taken quickly to a lab to be identified. Staff are calling home, calling to their spouses, and they're very well in tears, saying, I can't leave the office. There's that white powder is in an envelope. And then, of course, the relief when it comes back and it was not anthrax or something else. Media is, you may be hearing some of this for the first time. These were all known. Media is not that excited about talking about threats that come to people on the right, or people who are conservative. They are far more wanting to whip up an audience of sympathy for people on the left, and it should be for everybody. This is something that affects everybody. We have to look at the laws, as you've already indicated. You should be pursued if you are sending out those threatening type of messages. And when I'm saying threatening messages, I'm not talking about threatening somebody because you're taking on their political position and you've got a strong debating point. But if you're threatening them personally, no, there actually are laws about that. And those laws need to be upheld at least as strongly for um, potential violators on the left as they are from the right. Where there's a threat, follow through, see that the person is charged, and see that there is something significant that would go with the charge of threatening somebody's life. That's, you know, I won't go through the whole crime agenda right now, but I was just talking 24 hours ago with somebody who had arrested someone recently who had not that long ago been charged with the brutal killing of somebody. It was a manslaughter charge, and the person was let out after a fairly short period of time. So all of these messages and all these actions add up to, if the message going out is that you can act with impunity, that you can threaten people and nothing really is going to happen, it's going to keep happening. There has to be a meaningful pursuit, an apprehension, and then a proper trial and conviction, and then some serious repercussions once the guilty plea has been proven, and that is happening very little. So I'm concerned that we may see a rise in this type of threat environment.
So many observations right now with individuals losing their job, individuals being outed for their aggressive verbal behavior. These are possibly game changers. What a great exhortation. I'm hate to say it, Stock, but my husband and I, we have over 1,000. As a matter of fact, just in the last 24 hours, I screen captured another 180 comments directed specifically at me, and a few of them do have a violent nature to them. And it's so funny, like we often just kind of walk past that, partly because the volume is so enormous, but it is so important that boundaries are set because not just for us right now, today, in terms of our personal safety, but also for precedents, right? Because we are setting a trajectory for future generations. And so to stand at this intersection of setting boundaries, using the laws that are in place, ensuring that we are having courage, standing in the public sphere with courage and strength. And yet at the same time, this is what I appreciated about Charlie, particularly seemingly in his latter years as he matured as a father and as a public figure, really leaning into these controversial conversations with a respect for humanity, with a respect for people's right to disagree and to disagree passionately, but never losing that anchor point of respect for humanity, for the individual that we are dialoguing with, digging deep, finding love. And I really believe, as believers, this is one of our most powerful responses in this moment. Let's set boundaries where boundaries need to be set to protect ourselves and our children. But let's also lean into public discourse in a way that models courage and love and kindness. These are some of my dominant thoughts as we're speaking and as we're beginning to land this. Any final thoughts and encouragements that you have for our viewers right now, Mr. Day?
Well, people should be aware of what you, your husband, your family have been through. You were very gracious, especially when you were running for office. And I think a lot of your viewers are not aware of the level of intensity, vindictive, the threatening, the malicious, unbelievable. What I happen to just know some of that that you and your family went through. I think most people would be shocked. I hate to say this, but you're going to get very little sympathetic coverage because you are seen as small c conservative. If you were a broadcaster of the left and talking about this, you would get huge sympathy. But this is where we need to see more honesty. And I will say this: the mainstream media is significantly compliant in allowing this atmosphere of either real or threatened violence against those who hold small c conservative views. Mainstream media is playing a significant role there, and I declare among them the word guilty in terms of, are you raising the temperature, or are you lowering it by legitimately and intellectually allowing people to understand that there's two sides on all of these issues. So your story will increasingly be a motivator for people to stand regardless. And I know you will do that. And I'll stand with you.
Mm. Well, thank you, Mr. Day. You've been such a source of courage for so many, and you're such a level voice in our times. And we appreciate you staying in your lane and continuing to bring your voice to the table. This has been such a or I won't say wonderful is the wrong word. This has been such a important conversation, and I appreciate you taking time today. Thank you so much. Oh, before we go, you got a new podcast. Tell our viewers about it.
Yeah, check it out on Spotify. If you go and it's on YouTube, and I'm just kind of getting my wings here. It's not something I've got a lot of experience on that technology side, but Stockwell Day to Day News. There's a number of episodes that are up. I'm trying to do it about 5 times a week, and we take the main items of the day and give you the insights behind those items that you're simply not getting from mainstream media. So either check it out on X, where you can find it on my posting on X, or go to Spotify Stockwell Day at Day to Day News. Be happy to have you watching and commenting. Thanks for that opportunity.
Well, there you have it. I'm so excited that you have begun that. And so, on that note, too, if you're watching this on social media, take a minute to comment on this, share it with your friends if you have appreciated some of the dialogue here today, and click that little love emoji because that will signal to Facebook, to YouTube, or whatever platform that you're watching this on, that this is engaging content that should be shared. That's one way we can all work together. Mr. Day, thank you so much again for joining us today and for all you do.
And thanks for all you do. Bye now.